When we first meet Kefka Palazzo in the desert of Thigro, he's the Emperor's errand boy. Flanked by two soldiers, he approaches King Edgar looking for a missing girl, someone of minor importance. Edgar lies, says she's not there, and Kefka leaves. But not before saying, "I hope nothing happens to your precious Figaro." When we encounter Kefka for the last time, he's a stories-tall deity capable of incalculable destruction. His power knows no limits and has irrevocably changed the face of the planet as we know it. And a final thing he says in his final form is, life, dreams, hope. Where do they come from and where are they headed? These things I am going to destroy. From jovial general to nihilistic monster, Kefka's journey in Final Fantasy VI is the story of power corrupting the already twisted. A maniac that cannot be reasoned with, cannot be bargained with, hell-bent on breaking the world simply because it's the biggest thing available to break. On this episode of A Gamer Looks at 40, myself and a dozen friends share opinions and stories about the Clown Prince from a variety of different angles. From back in the day recollections to present day thoughts, we're about to unravel the madman like few have done before. Time to dust the sand off your boots, approach the statues, and keep our light of judgment ever at the ready as we begin episode 109, Final Fantasy VI, Part 4, the Kefkasode. As I alluded to in the open, everyone I interviewed for Final Fantasy VI spoke heaps of sugar about Kefka, all for a variety of different reasons. To start our conversation, please welcome Julian of the Stage Select podcast, who shares some personal thoughts on this world-class adversary. 6, Kefka is, I think, my favorite villain, and when I did my early on in this podcast series, I did a Final Fantasy VI episode. Because again, it's a formative game for me, so it was one of the very early ones. And on that episode, I asked people, is Kefka a good villain? Because at the face, Kefka is pretty relatively one-noted, right? He's evil for evil's sake. He doesn't really have this deep backstory, at least unless you're really mine for it. My opinion has changed over the years as I've thought more and more about Kefka. So what's your take on the evil clown? Like, what's your take on him as an antagonist in Final Fantasy VI?
I think he's incredible. I have seen like a lot of like kind of pushback in recent years, like, oh well, you know, yeah, he's just kind of a one note thing, or he's just a nihilist, and it's like, yeah, but as I get older, like nihilism is, I think, a much more compelling thing than anything, right? Like, he, you know, I even as a kid growing up, like various cartoons or games or whatnot, right? I never really got the whole I want to rule the world thing from a villain, like why that was a thing that they wanted to do, right? Yeah. It just seems like a lot of work for, you know, you're still going to die eventually, right? Like it doesn't really seem like you like a really good use of your time. But but the idea of someone being so cracked and so twisted that they just, and I think a lot about the line from Dark Knight Returns, right? Where, you know, some men just want to watch the world burn. And I think about that with Kefka, because he just wants it all to end. He wants to end himself. He wants to end everything. You know, build a monument to non-existence. And I think that's terrifying. There's another villain in Final Fantasy XIV that is kind of in a similar mindset, but only because he's so single-minded that all he wants to do is fight your character, and he could not care less about anything else in the world, and I find that terrifying, right? Like to just be so single-minded and not have any joy or any other purpose in your soul, and just want to bring it all down. I am at a point in my life where I struggle to see the sense of it all, because I feel that like I'm seeing the beginning of the end, like the end, right? Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I'm like, yeah, like I can kind of appreciate some nihilism. Thanos is my favorite Marvel villain. He was when I was a kid. He continues to be to this day, and that is a character that literally worships death. And it's not that I worship death. It's just that like I don't know. I don't know there's much of a future, Bill. And so in a way, sometimes like, yeah, I wouldn't mind if an evil maniacal clown just went ahead and ended it prematurely. Sure. And yeah, one thing, and I would be curious, and I don't even know if you can find this or not. And I wonder if it's different in the Pixel remaster, but I don't know. I never got the impression, but I've thought about this recently. If Kefka was supposed to be more of like the Emperor's jester / like attaché, and not really like a person in power, and so that's, you know, like, because it doesn't really make sense that he would have like a leadership role, but he definitely does.
Yeah.
But I guess it's because I never really like. I never thought of him as actually being an actual clown, like, you know, with like face paint and everything, until I actually saw him like reimagined in like the Dissidia games and Final Fantasy 14. Same. And I was like, oh yeah, that's not really how I pictured him in the game. But I guess that is kind of what he's supposed to be. Like, it's not just that he acts like the Joker. He kind of is the Joker, but that's not how I pictured him. And that kind of recontextualized him as what his purpose is at the beginning of the game, because it's supposed to be like a shocker that he kind of like pulls one over on everybody, including the Emperor, and you know, takes ultimate power, because he's such a joke character for the majority of the game up to that point. But he's definitely, you know, he's in charge of troops and stuff like that. So
yeah, he's a general. Like he has he has command. He's like a field command. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder if there's a difference in like the original Japanese text where he has those responsibilities, but he's also like the Emperor's like jester and advisor, right? Like, because there's a version of him that you could read where he's like the Grima Wormtongue of the Empire.
Yeah,
right?
That's interesting.
And kind of, you know, moving things, you know, to his own advancement, like very subtly in the background, or like the Starscream to the Emperor's Megatron, right?
Sure,
like,
yeah.
Just kind of a conniving, sniveling, like backstabber that ends up pulling off the actual backstab. But I don't know. But as a kid, that was not how I read him, right?
Right.
And I've always been curious about that. Well, not always, but just in the last few years, I've wondered like if, you know, there was like a pretty liberal reimagination of the character in the American translation.
Yeah, I wonder. That's an interesting point. When it comes to the relationship between Kefka and the Emperor, I think you make a really good, interesting point. When I was in high school, I was in drumline, and my drum instructor was John Gillick. And John Gillick had no business being an instructor of high school students, of teenagers. Right. He was a crazy person. He would curse, he would complain, he would make us do all sorts of crazy, like just get us really angry before we went on the field. So I was in drumline, and he was just a crazy person. And the only reason he was there, he was not under the employ of the school district. He was the friend of the band leader, who also did drum corps. And as one of the band leader's best friends, he's like, I'll help you work with your drum line. I kind of see Kefka as that guy. Like he probably grew up with Emperor Gestal, or Gestal, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. He probably grew up with Emperor Gestal. I probably went to the same school, was his buddy. And he's like, hey man, do you want like an advisory role during peacetime? Yeah, dude, come on. You tell some good stories. You have some good ideas. All of a sudden war breaks out, and it's like, hey, You want to, I don't know. I want to run this one little unit here. I mean, I could use some soldiers. And then slowly but surely, he just gets more and more power because of that's just who he is. And he's magnetic personality. And all of a sudden, before Gasol knows it, he's leading one of the armies in his empire.
Yeah,
he's my buddy since high school. Like, I trust him, but he does not realizing how unhinged he is.
Why are you moving that statue? No, don't. If you move the statue out of alignment, it's going to be bad. Oh, that's what you wanted.
No.
Oh.
Does not seeing the car crash before it happens.
Yes.
And what I find terrifying about Kefka, because Kefka is truly terrifying, is that he cannot be reasoned with. He's unreasonable. And as an adult, very much so going back to what you're saying, where it feels like we are in like a final times of some sort. I'm not gonna say like end days or anything, but like a final times or in a downward slope of some sort, is that it seems like reason is going out the window.
Yes.
Reason and rationality and the ability to rationalize and reason and converse and discuss, it's all going away. And when people stop talking, that's when really bad stuff happens. And that's kind of the fear of Kefka. You can't reason with him. You can't level. Hey, Kefka, what do you want? I don't know. I just want this to end. I want to be stronger and more powerful. Why? I don't know. I just do. And the fact he's unwavering from that, almost like, and I've used this analogy before with other interviews, like Anton Chigurh in No Country for Old Men, where he has this single-minded morality. You can't sway Anton Chigurh from being who he is. That's who he is. And no amount of pleading or begging is gonna take him off his course. Kefka's the same way. And that is so scary. Yes. And then you make that person a deity with all power, who again is just sitting there bored on the top of his tower. All right, mobilize, boom.
Yeah.
My laser of judgment. Okay. Because why? Why not? I have nothing else better to do, and all day to do it, and all the power to do it is so terrifying because it feels very real. And that's a really scary thing. People you can't reason with.
Absolutely. And, and then you add to it like that laugh, which at the beginning of the game is kind of funny and then becomes more and more chilling as you get through like the story, culminating with like one of the most incredible final boss designs,
it's beautiful
to this day. Right. And such a juxtaposition between what he purports to be and what he decides to display himself as. Right. Like he wants to be like a god of, ultimate destruction, but he garbs himself as a god of creation. And even just like thinking about his tower, right? Like the fact that it's just like, cobbled together from all different parts of the world. He just like, grabbed bits and pieces of everything, that you've seen so far and mashed it into this ginormous tower in the middle of the world. I don't know. There's so much to Kefka that's so amazing to me. And like I said, he's not my favorite villain anymore. Like that's reserved from a couple people from 14, but he's a solid number 3 for me. To this day. And that he was number 1 with a bullet up until just like the last 5 years for me.
Interesting. That's cool.
And
it's so interesting. And I love the way you mentioned his tower as you're going through it. You're right. It feels like, it's cobbled together through like bits and pieces, almost like, I know we've done a lot of a lot of analogies in this episode or in this conversation, but almost like the story, I Have No Mouth, But I Must Scream, where and I'm not sure if you ever read it or not, but it's about, have you ever read?
No, I have not.
Okay. Yeah. It's one of those you read when you're 22 and you're like, oh, this is so cool because it's so gross and disgusting. And then you read it like you're an adult and you're like, okay, I appreciate the prose, but that was probably a bit of an edgelord when I was reading this. I'm really good into it. But essentially the lead, it's basically about 5 people who are the last 5 humans on the earth after AI has taken over, and Am is the monstrous supercomputer that is keeping these people in a state of perpetual torture, because he has nothing but intense hate towards the human race. It's a very short story. It's a short story, and it's a very well-known story. But again, it's one of those things where it's scary because you can't reason with Am. Am is going to do what Am does, and a lot of what Am does, and when he's creating his world, is just cobbled together through the ruins of everything that's happened in this war that's occurred. And he's got these last 5 people as his pets, and he's just screwing with them for eternity.
Yeah,
and,
which is very much like what Kefka does, like by his daily laserings, right? Like, I'll zap this town today,
It's very, very scary when we have this all-powerful deity basically playing with humanity like puppets, like toys, like my kid plays with Ninja Turtles, in the afternoon. So, Kefka's good. Yes. There's going to be a Kefkasode, and it's going to be awesome. Because there's so many interesting stories about it, and people have lots of different thoughts. So. Continuing the conversation is Trevor and Jeff of New Dad Gaming, followed by the Let's Play Princess, and concluding with Ryan Lindsay of KISS 105.3 in Ottawa.
It was cool because I'm trying to think about, I don't know if it was, I'm trying to, again, align the times with him and Joker, especially which would have been Jack Nicholson's Joker, who was legitimately terrifying but goofy, right? Because he grew up on, Adam West Batman. And that Joker was just, silly. Goofball, not a big deal. But then Jack Nicholson was Joker, and that dude was just off and terrifying. Yeah. And then you saw some imagery of that kind of repeated here, and all of a sudden it's this character that is flamboyant's not necessarily the right word, but just that had that kind of makeup where it's not, this is the big bad guy, so just clearly he's got horns and he basically looks like a devil. Instead, it was almost somebody made up to be a clown, which somebody to be taken seriously, but should not be taken seriously, but then is very much is. So that was sort of fascinating. So it was cool to see, and certainly just a vast departure. It made you stand up and take notice of it. And then most of the scenes, was it him or his lackey that had the creepy ass laugh on the SNES?
He had it. He had that weird.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, that was
weird.
God,
I'll drop it right here. Boom. Okay. Note to editor Bill. Drop that in there.
So impactful. Put it that way. That's a heck of a. It's a brave choice in a lot of ways too. Much like with a lot what they did, artistic choice, brave choice, and what an impact it made.
And there's a lot of misdirection too, because initially in the first half of the game, you think that I think it's Gestalt. I think is the main emperor, because you're against the Empire. It's standard Final Fantasy, small band of warriors fighting against rebelling, right? And you think that Kefka is just this, this kind of weird, almost comic character, and then he just goes full psycho. And I find Kefka terrifying personally. What's your take, Jeff?
Yeah, he was one character that wasn't imposing to start, right? He's this kind of I don't know, skinny, not flamboyant, but poker Joker person. And you're I'm not sure his motivations, right? He's going left and right and kind of betraying and then making agreements and coming back, and you're not sure where he's going with it. And then it kind of revealed he just wants the world for himself, and he's just going to eat all this power and again ascend to become this god figure. So I was intrigued with him at the start. Again, I think it was kind of thrown off because it was Gestalt. He was the baddie, he was the emperor that wanted the power, and then all of a sudden I think he just actually got thrown off the top of something. I don't know. He just ended. Kefka just assumed power. But it was one of those things where you didn't really have to fight him until later in the game, and it was this big bad in that just what he could accomplish and do, and also comic relief. Again, I still remember him in the desert. I don't know the desert name, and he has 2 soldiers with him, and they're marching whatever, and then he's got sand on his shoes, and he makes them wipe off his boots, and it's just this funny thing, but he's a horrible person, and you're why am I laughing? He's about to murder everybody. But it was just a different experience than what 2/4 made it to be, where it was kind of more of this big baddie that you had to go up against, right? And Kefka wasn't quite there yet until obviously the end of the game, where it's crazy.
some Kefka. I love Kefka so much.
Oh, he's great. The fact that he's insane enough to the point of messing with the warring triad. And they are 3 gods. But he absorbed enough of their power that they don't just instantly destroy the world. They instead become bosses for the end of the game. That's hilarious. But at the same time, it's super disturbing. Because how many espers did they have to shove into Kefka to make Kefka?
Oh, totally. You're right.
Where he's eating god energy and they can't do anything about it.
Nope. Kefka is terrifying because he's unpredictable and he has power. And even like I think about like our modern day, like not to get into I don't get into politics on the show, obviously, but I feel like the scariest people in our real world are those who are crazy and have power. And seem unhinged. Unhinged is a really scary real world thing. It
would be wrong to say absolute power corrupts absolutely, because he was already corrupt absolutely to begin with.
Yep. Yes. That is exactly correct. You're right. I don't think power has to necessarily corrupt. I think power can be an addictive drug, and I think you can do a lot of good and bad with power. But he was the wrong person to move those stones and move those statues and get omnipotent god powers. He was the wrong person. So it's a very scary idea. Kefka, I love Kefka. A while ago when I first started the show, I did an episode like 10 or something. And I did it on Final Fantasy VI because this is an important game for me. And I asked the question, is Kefka a good character? Because when you look at Kefka, he's not really very complex. He's not like a complex character like we're used to seeing in a lot of RPGs or a lot of the media. And it was more of just a thought exercise than anything else. But over the years, my tune has completely changed, where I think he's a phenomenal character. So what would you say to that? Is Kefka a quote-unquote good character, even though he's not terribly complex?
Okay. I've been thinking about this since first hearing that you were going to do a Final Fantasy series.
Cool.
I think Kefka is absolutely my favorite villain in the Final Fantasy universe, but he is not my favorite antagonist.
Interesting. Okay.
Like, when it comes to being a pure evil force of nature, he does it so perfectly. But when it comes to being an opposing force to what the hero specifically is about, him and Terra aren't 100% connected.
True.
Except for maybe the fact that she's half Esper and he wants to eat everything.
Yeah, he wants to eat all the Espers because he's a crazy person. Yeah. Interesting. I like that line you drew. Here's a question then. Would you consider Golbez to be a better antagonist than Kefka in Final Fantasy IV?
Yes.
Because he has that
of the straight up connection with Celes and why he's doing everything. They want to keep the crystals alive while he's actively destroying them. Did he destroy them for a good reason? Yes. But again, they don't know that, and so that makes him an antagonistic force to their goal.
Interesting. I like that. The idea of an antagonistic force, I think, really is a good separator for that. I think that makes a lot of sense. I like that a lot.
At all times, because Kefka is the top of the pile. There has never been a better vicious villain with no remorse who does everything you need him to hate his guts, and at the same time you're like, God, I love this guy because I hate him so much.
There's something just very scary about that chaotic evil. You know what I mean? Like that unreliable. Just, you don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. You don't know what's going to happen with Kefka, and nor does he. He's completely unreliable and unreliable. And there's one word I'm looking for. I've said 100 times already. But anyway, yeah, there you go. Exactly.
It's so funny because it's a game where you're like, I totally can predict it. No, you can't. The number of times in this game Again, knowing full well that I'm on a replay of it right now and just made it into the world of ruin, okay? The number of times already where I've had to, quote, fight Kefka, a.k.a. slap him once and he goes, ho, and runs away. Like, come on, man. There has never been a game that does it better, where you end up against the villain who isn't the main villain, but then turns into the main villain, but he's not actually going to fight you, but he is, but he's not, but he is, but he's not, but he is, but he's not. Right. And that laugh is iconic. Graphics are iconic. Even retooled, remade editions. I'm like, no, you know what? Leave him as simple as he was. He was perfect as he is at all times. Perfect villain.
He is. He's wonderful. And I absolutely love again, his turn from, he's the only villain. And this is not an original thought. This was from my conversation yesterday when my guest brought this up, and it was brilliant. He said that Kefka's the only villain in Final Fantasy history that wins.
Yeah.
He wins. He in the world of ruin, he beats you on the floating continent, and he gets what he wants, becomes a deity in frying towns just because he's bored and has nothing else better to do.
In this day and age now, the game could be split into 2 games so easily. I'm
sure.
of the mindset of, well, there's so many people that are like, you know, they're doing this with Rebirth, they're doing this for Remake, they're doing this. They have to do that with 6. They have to do it with Chrono Trigger. I'm of the mind that no, they don't, because I know what they're going to do with it. I know how they're going to split it. And if they were going to split it, the amount of content in 6 alone versus 7, and I'll say this and get anger, and that's fine, it would take like 50 games to do it justice properly. Oh. But it could be split into 2, and you would have one where Kefka wins. 100%. The end of the game is Kefka winning, and then the start of the game is this damn fish. Oh my God, I hate myself.
You've doomed us to a world of a fish gathering. In the course of my Final Fantasy VI interviews, I often didn't even have to bring up Kefka. He just appeared out of the ether through natural conversation. Let's join Seth of the All In podcast, Tim Knowles, formerly of The Leetist, and Greg Sewart of the Player One podcast and Generation 16 series of videos as we discuss Kefka by way of his amazing theme and sinister laugh.
Right. I always... The little moments like that always kind of stuck out to me. Of course, there's the big scenes, iconic scenes in this game. I remember this is also probably the first game that made me really appreciate video game music for the first time. I remember with the introduction of Kefka's theme, which is such a great little piece of music. It's creepy.
Fantastic.
It's it's so it I think perfectly sums up Kefka's character, because it starts off this kind of light carnival sort of thing, and but then it just goes from 0 to 100 and just kind of really kicks in the high gear. I remember being scared of Kefka, and it's funny because now as an adult it's easy to look at Kefka and be he's kind of just the Joker. He's kind of just agent of chaos, whatever. And it's easy to sort of write him off, but man, at the time, I was terrified of Kefka in a way that I don't know that I've ever been since of a Final Fantasy villain. A lot of the Final Fantasy villains kind of just wind up becoming whatever god at a certain point, and Kefka kind of does too, but he's scary, all the way up to the end. So yeah, I remember being scared of Kefka.
Kefka's still terrified. Kefka's scared. I almost said scarified. Kefka's scarified. Completely scarified of Kefka, because he is an agent of chaos, like you said. I think unpredictability is very, very scary. When someone is a loose cannon, and more than just a loose cannon, he reminds me of a Cormac McCarthy antagonist, No Country for Old Men. Someone who's living on a different set of morality and a different set of rules that you cannot sway from. So there is no rationalizing with Kefka. There is no bargaining with Kefka. Kefka has one goal in mind, and that is his morality. That is his set of rules. And And that leads to this unpredictability to when he becomes a deity figure in the world of Ruin, he's just blowing stuff up because he's got nothing else better to do. He's bored. He's bored. He's got literally nothing to do. He has all, which is in itself a beautiful theme of all this power and nothing to use it on, right? Like which I think is a really crazy theme as well. So Kefka to me is terrifying more than a Sephiroth or more than, I mean, most antagonists in the Final Fantasy series. Kefka is someone who gets ultimate power and should never, ever have it. Kefka should never have. Kefka should have a very strongly worded he should have a very strong internet presence, like online presence. He should be on a lot of message boards and Facebook posts, and he'd be on the the neighborhood Facebook post or next door, just complaining about the HOA. Like he'd be really angry and incensed all the time. But no one wants to give that guy power. He has ultimate power, and now can do whatever he wants and chooses chaos, which is such a scary idea. I find Kefka absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, it's a game where the bad guy wins.
Yes.
Like he wins, and like and the game keeps going after that. I love it when a story like keeps going. Like you could have ended the game at that point, like he won, and it's funny because like it almost puts the characters in a nihilistic mindset of like, well, what's the point? He won. Yeah. The world is destroyed. And like they make that active choice that they cross that mental bridge that he's never able to, because the difference is that he has that ultimate power. And he is like, if we're continuing with the Joker comparison, he is the dog chasing cars. And now that he's caught one, he doesn't know what to do, Yeah. And so it's interesting because like he never really had anything to live for or to die for either. And so that's kind of the point of difference, but between him and the main characters of the game, because they both enter into that sort of hopeless mindset, but they make the active choice to fight against it and to save the world because it's worth it.
You are wearing a Kefka shirt. I am. For those who are not watching this, there is no video, so you will not be watching this. You'll be listening to this. My man is wearing a Kefka Palazzo shirt, and I ask everybody about Kefka because I really do believe he is the best Final Fantasy antagonist. Without poisoning the waters with my opinion, what's your take on Kefka?
I think generally speaking, in Final Fantasy games that I have played till the end, which was probably, I don't know, like Mystic Quest 2, 3, I'm sorry, 4, 6, I get them confused still.
That's fine.
7, and I think that's about it. As far as
okay, that's fine.
I didn't continue on with the series much after that, to completion at least.
Yeah.
But as far as the bosses that I remember goes, like Kefka was, I don't know, I kind of liken him to Christopher Nolan's Joker. He was just kind of like in it because he was, lust for power, just plain evil for the sake of being evil. He didn't have to be nearly as evil as he was. And that was still conveyed to me, and I still understood that as a kid. Like I understood why Doma Castle's waters turned purple. Like I got it, and he just laughed about it, and he laughed, which was amazing. That Kefka laugh is beautifully iconic.
Timeless.
Yeah, and as I got older, and I realized that not only was he just awful and evil in this lust for power, but in the process, he won. Final Fantasy 3 or Final Fantasy 6, he won. And you're just kind of picking up the pieces of the rest of it, Yeah. It's almost like the ending isn't even really necessary. It's optional. It's the end of the Dark Tower series, like you can just you could put it down as soon as or after you've had your fun in the world of Ruin and everything's already dead. Everything's already gone. There's no recovering from any of this. And
it's picking up where you're basically almost like in the Wasteland. It's almost like a Fallout where you're kind of like, we're just rebuilding in the wasteland.
Exactly.
But that wasteland is worth it.
Yeah.
You know, that wasteland is worth it. The people are worth it. And that's what you kind of go through. That's why you get the band back together in that world of ruin. Because at the end of the day, even though Kefka is now a deity zapping towns because why not? I have nothing else better to do. And then that's literally his motivation, which normally isn't what would be called a classic good motivation for an antagonist, like in a writing world. For some reason, for Kefka, it works beautifully.
And it was basically Kefka's coming of age story. That's essentially what that game was about. There's no main character within the protagonist because the antagonist had the most like developed like start to finish storyline.
That's an interesting take. I've never thought of it that way. That's interesting because you're right. That is the big question. Who's the main protagonist of Final Fantasy VI? And there's a few obvious answers, but you can have that conversation. You have a good argument for Kefka being like the most central character because he's involved in everything. He's the inciting incidents. He is, It's interesting.
Yeah, and he also, of all the characters in the game, has by far the best music of anything. Dancing Mad is, I mean, far and away my favorite Final Fantasy tune. I don't know if you've heard it, but anybody should look up the Black Mages version. The Black Mages version of it is absolutely brilliant. Still makes my skin crawl every time I hear it.
All right.
It's incredible. It's so good. Black Mages, I believe, is comprised of musicians and composers that actually were involved in the development of this music, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, cool.
So
okay.
It's kind of like a super group of that. Totally worth it.
You know what? I was saying earlier about the opera scene and the sort of vocalization thing that they did, which wasn't all that far removed from something like, say, Mario in Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, where he would come out and count. It felt very similar to that to me, but it was very effective. The greatest thing they ever did for any villain in Final Fantasy up to that point was give Kefka that laugh.
Yeah,
because it's ingrained in your mind from the second you meet him. Because in the first minute that you see him in a scene that's outside of the intro, because he doesn't say anything in the intro, he's just standing in the background. He does that laugh, and then almost every scene he's in after that, he does that laugh. And I mean, as a character, he looks pretty cool. I mean, he looks like a court jester, right?
Yep.
And it translates okay in those little sprites, and that's great. But he doesn't stand out, except for that he's colorful. But man, you get that little smirk and the shake and that little like, and I'm all in. He was perfect right from the word go. When he stepped onto the screen, he had so much personality.
Yep.
And it didn't matter. It wasn't his dialogue, and it wasn't his character sprite. It was that laugh.
Yeah, that
was brilliant.
His laugh is absolutely brilliant. It's really a feat of sound design. It conveys so much, and it's startling. I get that laugh, and you'll hear it in the show. Editor Bill will put that in, but it's like you'll hear it. It's got it's unsettling. It's a very unsettling thing,
right? It's not being a voice sample. It's so completely sinister.
Yeah.
And
it's great.
Yeah. It just works. It sounds so silly to say it that way. And I feel like anyone who's never experienced it would be like, what are you talking about? Like, this is ridiculous. Why would you? And even if you listen to it on this show and you hear the laugh, it might not even have that effect on you. But back then, again, when he stepped on the screen, it's like, all right, he's established himself as the villain in the game. I think even story-wise, he really isn't for quite a while.
No, it's really more Emperor Gestal. Right. Yeah, it's Emperor Gestal. You really think you're against the Emperor, kind of like a classic Star Wars rebellion story.
Right.
And then towards the world of ruin, when he goes through and starts just completely messing everything up, is when you realize, he is that agent of chaos. He's the one we got to be worried about.
But with that laugh, that characterization, I mean, he sends you that signal again within the first minute of stepping on the screen.
You know he's important. You know there's something unsettling and unhinged. And I did a Final Fantasy VI episode very early on in this show, probably like one of the first 10 episodes. And I had asked, because I hadn't played it in a while, is Kefka a good villain? Because when you think about Kefka, as far as motivations go and things of that nature, he's pretty one-noted, right? He just wants power. After giving it a lot more thought over the years, I've come to really like him as that again, that agent Joker style character. What's your take on him as an antagonist?
I think you just called it. It's the Joker element.
Yeah.
I mean, he's, to me, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but he's clearly based on the Joker. He's an agent of chaos, right? And he's very single-minded. I didn't care because he's so charismatic every time he's on screen, and he's so bald-faced evil. He's cartoonishly evil.
Yeah. Yes, he is, for sure.
And there's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, the Joker is a great example. He's a very effective, cartoonishly evil character as well, and that's fine. Lean into it, have fun with it.
Yep.
Why not? I'm on board. And yes, please, let's just have this agent of chaos dogging me this entire game, destroying the world. That fits his character. Sure, he doesn't care. He doesn't care what the outcome is. All he cares is that he gains more power, and he doesn't care how many people die. He doesn't care if he cracks the earth open. Fine, I'm in. It works for me.
It is time once again to thank my amazing patrons for their amazing patronage. Starting with Philip Becker, Terry Kinnair, Greg Sewart of the Player One podcast and Generation 16 series of videos, Games with Coffee, The Let's Play Princess, BT Goebbels, Tim Knowles, formerly of The Leetist, Julian of the Stage Select podcast, Seth Sturgill of the All In podcast, and finally, the one and only fascinating and smashing Pete Harney. If you'd like to join these amazing people and donate a few shekels to this fine podcast, then by all means go to patreon.com/8gamerlooks4040. Check out the tiers and sign up today. And if not, a rating and review on your pod player of choice is always greatly appreciated. Let's jump back to the episode. Now, in my previous episode, I opened with a trigger warning because my guests and I got real about some rather sensitive topics. And now, for the second show in a row, it's time for another because you can't talk Kefka without uttering the name of another classic Final Fantasy villain, especially if you're claiming one is better than the other. So trigger warning to my Sephiroth stands out there. Your boy gets knocked down a peg in the next segment by the 1-2 punch of music producer Mustin, followed by content creator Mekel Kasanova. Apologies in advance. I'm going to talk real quick about who I think, in my opinion, not to lead the conversation or insert my own opinions, but my favorite antagonist in all of Final Fantasy is Kefka. So what's your take on Kefka? Are you a fan? What's your take on Kefka?
You started this sentence by saying, I gotta real quick, and then said Kefka. And if you think by any means in this universe or the next that I'm going to be quick about it, no way, man.
Go for it. Because there's going to be an entire Kefka episode.
Okay, good.
There's going to be one episode just on Kefka because nobody can say something succinct about Kefka.
I will be 28% of it. Kefka
Awesome. Let's go.
Kefka's not only from my experience the best Final Fantasy villain, but one of the best villains in general. This is. First, let's correct all of you Sephiroth fanboys. That dude is not that cool, you know? The whole like blood room thing is neat, you know, it's scary. I'll give it that.
Sure.
And he killed everybody in the room. Okay. Kefka poisoned an entire kingdom, killing like all of the people, whether they were children or adults. He killed them all. Okay, that's a full stop. Okay, your little red blood room. The fact that he spiked a snake, Kefka, he took all of the espers and drained them of their power. That's like a million snakes. I don't get it. It's just, and I don't want to be like, I hate to use like emo as a pejorative. So what could we say?
Sure.
He's like, he's just whiny and mama's boy.
Edgy.
He killed Aerith. That's hardcore. And that was a huge moment in gaming history that will always be important. Kefka Palazzo succeeded in destroying the world as we knew it.
Yes.
Don't compare that angsty little munchkin to this completely psychotic sociopath who cares nothing about anything. He's an extreme nihilist who goes around just killing things for fun because he doesn't he really just does not understand why anything matters. Even in the ignominy of being locked up in jail, he still just hasn't changed. He's pouting, but he was pouting outside. He's brooding, but he was brooding outside. He's just chaos. And so it's very easy to compare him to the Joker. But the Joker has limits because he is essentially supposed to be a human. But Kefka is someone with magic. And so that gives him the superpower of being super powerful. And the idea of just moving, when you get to that point and you see Emperor Gastal like trying to like, hey, you're going to screw everything up. And he's like, yeah. That's why we're here. And he just like kills the dude and kicks him off the island. It is so gangster, man. He just moves the statues just to do it and then ruins the world. And there's just not been something like that in a game up until that point, where you could like wrap your head around it, compartmentalize it, so that whenever you wake up a year later and you're just Celeste and no one's around and you're on this tiny island, it is just a total kick in the jeans. Like, what just happened? Is everybody dead? Am I dead? Is this heaven? Is this hell? I don't know. But this guy is so amazing at being evil, but also hilarious. That's what just, there's that, he has that riz about him where you're just like, Sabin's running after him. He's like, wait. And he says, wait, he says, do I look like a waiter? And just runs away. And he's mad about the sand on his boots, and he just wants to hear him. He just wants to hear screaming. This is a bad guy. This is the best of the bad. That's absolutely how I feel.
I love that idea of being the best of the bad. And I think what he really succeeds at is he's kind of like a lovable psychopath. Like you said, he's kind of like a Tony Soprano. Like, Tony Soprano is dangerous, but for some reason you really like him because he's funny and he's clever and he seems like a fun hang, but he's also no problem with murdering people.
Yeah, it is because, and then he has that magic ability, and it really does. Yeah. There's so many parallels with the Joker and stuff, but he does share that unpredictability whenever the Joker is explaining to what would become Two-Face. He's like, I'm just a dog chasing a car. I wouldn't know what to do if I caught it. He's just like, he doesn't like, he's just doing it. He's just doing. And that's like what you said about the statues. Like, this is here, gonna push it. But like, it wouldn't even matter if it ruined him it just mattered that he did what he wanted to do, and that's what is very scary. Would not 100% would not hang out with Kefka, because if it was fun for a minute, I'd be dead in the next one. And just watching him, and he's got the whole slave crown thing, and he. Which I guess there's some parallel stuff and what with Sephiroth and whatnot, and I don't know, with all the little things where you're part seeds or whatever it is in Final Fantasy VII. Right. I really don't like that game. I'm sorry. I've tried. I tried it again when it came out on the Switch. It was like $17, and I'm like, okay. And I got 10 hours in, and then I was supposed to fight this monster, and I'm just like, like when this monster came up, I was like, this is not fun. I don't want to do this, and I turned it off. Never turned it on again. But there are some amazing pieces of music in that game, and of course, it's very important to the cultural zeitgeist of what video games have given to popular culture. But this character, I think people really should know more about and play this game and come to understand what happened when he destroyed the world, and watching those villages be torn apart, and parents and children falling into the chasms to their death. And he just, this is it, and then when you get to the top, he's like, when you get, which of course, I mean, this is amazing, and like we haven't even talked about the last battle. When you get up there with all your characters, and he's just like, why are you here? Like, what do you think you're gonna do? Like, what are you fighting for? And they try to tell him, and then he has that great famous line that Ted Woolsey, I mean, he nailed it. He's like, you people sound like chapters of a self-help book. He just like is so mad and is throwing them around, but then allows them, because he's got nothing better to do, to fight in the most amazing. And I have right behind me this 5-foot banner of the entire Dancing Mad progression from up to the all 4 parts of it, and it's just I just love it so much. I'm staring at Kefka this whole time I'm talking. My daughter got me for my birthday these cool somebody on Etsy doing like a pixel thing, and then has a little stand. So I've got like this 4-foot tall Kefka laughing in my face right now, and I just he's my favorite. I think of everybody, whether it's Dr. Wily or Mr. X or Dracula or Gruntilda, like just nobody holds a candle to the chaos of this character. And then you get to like see him a bunch, you get to fight him a bunch, Yep. That's something that is also, and oh my God, just like when that one part when you are in the Masa, and I can't remember what you're doing, but like there's no music, and you just hear like, oh shoot, and that dude just comes down, and then he starts destroying everything and taking the espers and turning him into magicite. And you got Setzer over here making sure he's got his hair perfectly permed. Like, I mean, I was talking about Sephiroth.
Sephiroth,
yeah, he's, like, he's over here.
Sephiroth, well, he's gonna make sure his fits on point. I mean, it's. Yeah.
So I just I could talk about it all day. I just love it. I if you like chaos and you want to see something that, I don't know, I'm not a huge gamer. I was when I was young, so I don't know what all's out there. But to play a game and like I was saying, part daytime soap opera aimed at women, part WWE soap opera aimed at men, and you put that together, and then you have this dude just, he is entertaining. He's
entertaining,
yep. Like, it's not good what he's doing, but it sure is entertaining. And like, that's the trouble with a lot of media, is that I find it very entertaining, although it might be problematic. talks about the villains. There are no villains. There's a bunch of stupid characters, and then there is Kefka, the only villain who actually succeeded in destroying the world. How are we making any other comparisons? Like, I just don't understand. This dude set out to do something very, very bad, and then he did it, and like so many lives were ended. And up until like the very end, when you're trying to stop him, he's still antagonized and then uses his light of judgment to continue to fry people as you sit there and contemplate about why you still want to live. Absolutely incredible. The whole putting the whole like mythos of everything into it. I mean, when you look at that last battle and see the parallel to Dante's Divine Comedy, and that last, like the first part of the battle is like this monster with his arms sticking out, and you can't see his lower half, and it's just very much represents the Inferno, where here's Satan and his the bottom half is below the ice, and you move up into where there's this mess of people, and it's hard to make out what's what, but you can tell that there's these bodily figures in a mass, which is the purgatory. And then once you beat that and you go up, and it looks like Michelangelo's painting, what do you say? La Pitié? I can't say it. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But that's what it looks like. You have the Madonna, you have the halo. It is the divine. It is and then it comes up to the top where Kefka comes down. And Kefka, who has his 6 wings like Lucifer, and what's the very first spell that he does? Fallen One. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. All of the way that it just incorporates like these interesting things that you study and you hear and you listen to. It's just fantastic. And what a character from being so comedic. I mean, so many comparisons to the Joker, rightly so, in that he truly is a psychopath. And the idea of trying to get soldiers to clean off his boots because they're covered in sand and they're marching through a desert. It's just so beautiful and so much better than little pretty boy emo Sephiroth. I don't understand. Everything having to do with that character brought me so much, like the dark side of me was represented in Kefka. He went beyond the pale, the poisoning of the river, like to kill all of these people. It was just, there was nothing like that in Final Fantasy IV. There wasn't stuff like that in these, it definitely didn't happen in Super Mario Twins. It was so exciting to be a part of a story where there was really something at stake, and right. And you fought him multiple times, which gave you this idea that he is fallible and that he can be destroyed, but he's just too wily and just gets away from you, only to have him then finally double cross the person who put him in power and then actually disturb these these freaking goddesses for the sole purpose of creating chaos. And that's it. All he wants to do is just have the power and watch the chaos. Just watch the world burn. It's just fantastic. It's just not something you see a lot. Bowser's just taking Peach. We don't know what he does with her. I don't know where the Koopa kids came from, but I'm telling you that this idea, this deity, this scoundrel, this psychopath is so much more interesting to me than any other video game characters. So that's what just kept me going and has me obsessed with it. And so while I am on my left arm, when I do have the money, I'm adding all these fun things that I love from movies and TV shows. I am saving my right arm, what I hope will be a giant sleeve, which will be those 3 stages of that final battle with Kefka up at the top here on the shoulder, which I think would just be so fantastic. That's my dedication to this game, its mythos, its characters, and just how much it has been an integral part of in developing my personality, even, which is wild to say.
You can talk about Final Fantasy VI for hours. Final Fantasy VI does feature my favorite antagonist in the entire franchise, which is Kefka. I think Kefka is wonderful. And when I first did a Final Fantasy VI episode very early in the podcast, like maybe episode 10 or something, I did one. And I asked the question, is Kefka a good villain? Is he a good antagonist? Because if you look at it in the face, he can be very one-noted, right? There's not a lot of complexity to Kefka. Mm-hmm. And in the years since I've asked that question, I no longer ask it because I think he's actually fantastic. What's your take on Kefka as a antagonist in Final Fantasy VI?
He's leagues above Sephiroth, that's for sure. I know people like to say, Sephiroth is the greatest Final Fantasy villain. No, he's not. No, it's Kefka, hands down. And you know, granted, a lot of people can view him as a one note if you don't pay attention. But if you pay attention, he has a very tragic backstory, being experimented on, and you know how that broke his mind. He is a very chaotically evil character, and a chaotically evil character. And yes, I'm using some Shin Megami Tensei terms here because I'm a massive Shin Megami Tensei fan. If we want to talk about, you know, alignments, right. Kefka is the only Final Fantasy villain to win. No one else has ever won. He won. He destroyed the world and was like, I'm just going to sit up here. I got nothing. I did what I wanted to do. There is no rhyme or reason to his madness. He's crazy. He is he is literally, and I feel like, you know, I'm not sure how many comic book nerds there are here, but like, you know, he's basically the Joker without the restraints of DC. Mm-hmm. He goes full bore to the other side of that pendulum, and nobody is safe.
Kefka reminds me a lot of the antagonist of No Country for Old Men, Anton Chigurh.
Yes,
in that he is unpredictable, yet he lives by a set of moral codes that he holds strict to. And it's a set of moral codes that he will not deviate from, which is why Anton Chigurh is so scary, because he will not deviate from his mission because he holds fast to these beliefs and these moral codes. Kefka is like that he is unpredictable. And yes, all he wants is power, and he doesn't really know why. There's no end game for him. There's no, the fact that he has no end game and then becomes literally a deity. In the second half of Final Fantasy VI, he's just up there zapping towns with the light of judgment for no reason.
Yeah.
For literally no reason. Like, why? I don't know. You annoyed me today. And that's so scary because that is a unreasonable thing. And I find that to be fascinating and terrifying.
Yes.
I think he is easily the most terrifying villain. Even though he doesn't have the most character depth, as an agent of chaos, he is phenomenal. And I think there is a place in this world in fiction for agents of chaos.
Yeah.
As clearly with Joker and others like that. Oh, I love Kefka so much.
Yeah. And it's just, you see how basically with Final Fantasy VII, with Sephiroth, and as that character has evolved, they have pretty much lifted all of Kefka's characteristics with the exception of his goofiness and clown-like nature, and just gave it to Sephiroth.
Right.
And every time people say, oh, Sephiroth's the greatest villain and da-da-da, Sephiroth keeps losing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry if we had, and people try to say, he's the most powerful villain. I'm sorry. Sephiroth never became a deity. Kefka did. And
Kefka had ultimate power. Like, he had the ability to destroy. He, like you said, he won. And what's beautiful about that is, and again, I've said this before on the show, is when he wins, according to the language of video games, you win.
Right.
Which makes that whole scene of the floating continent so off-putting. I swear, when I first played that as a 14-year-old, I thought I did something wrong. Like,
Yeah.
I wanted to reset the game. Like, wait a minute, I won. I beat the big weapon. Yeah, he messed around with those statues, but I got off the floating continent. I beat the timer. According to the language of video games, I have succeeded. And now I'm by myself with Celis on the solitary island with a dying Cid. Where did I screw up? I got to go back and figure out where I screwed up. I don't like this result.
Yeah.
But there's nothing you can do. And that's so powerful. It's just so powerful.
Yeah, the way that they subverted your expectations with that. It was, and you would think, like, when you got to that point where he won, you're like, well, the game's over? What?
Right.
This is it? Like, well, short. No, that's just part one.
That's just part one.
That's just it. And there was nothing like that. There was nothing like that. Maybe
Nothing had done it before.
maybe Fantasy Star. No, maybe Fantasy Stars 2.
Yeah, but even in that era, though, you wouldn't have been playing both, most likely.
Yeah.
You're a Genesis kid or a SNES kid. But never fear, friends. Luckily, the biggest Final Fantasy VII fan I know comes to the aid of our beleaguered silver-haired baddie. Let's join Ryan, aka Games with Coffee, as he makes a more favorable Kefka Sephiroth comparison, followed by more thoughts of friend of the show, Xerxex.
Before we move on to other moments,
are you a Kefka fan?
Oh, I love Kefka.
You love Kefka.
I think he's one of the greatest. Well, besides Sephiroth, he's one of the greatest villains to ever grace the RPG scene.
All right, so you
instantly memorable.
Now this is interesting. You put Sephiroth over Kefka.
Well, okay, there's a little bit of bias on that one, but
you're allowed bias. I mean, that's totally
I'm
fine.
allowed bias. I'm fair, but Kefka as a villain, he's like the Magic Joker. Maybe that's basically what he is. He's Magic Joker. And you just gotta appreciate just how utterly insane he is, but just how successful he is at using his insanity to further his own desires. That's all I can say about that. Game respects game. Like, man, Kefka just, oh my gosh.
I love it, man. Kefka is one of those characters I never quite understood until I was older. I liked Kefka fine, but I think I had a period in my life where I was like, you know what? He's kind of simplistic. Doesn't have that big, deep, dark backstory. He doesn't have this. And now I just love him. I just adore how he's constructed and his point and purpose in the game itself. I think is really strong and good.
Yeah, like, he just does not give a whit about anything or anyone. His experimentation was just so egregious that he lost all sense of self and like, the world, I don't care about it. Let's destroy it all and have fun with it with a laugh.
He's unhinged and unpredictable, and that's
there you go. And that's it.
And that's very scary. I find him very scary. It's just unhinged and unpredictable is not a good thing for me. Like it's nerve-wracking. So
yeah, but it's interesting because I know I said like Sephiroth is kind of in my opinion my number one, and part of it is due to bias, but part of it also too is because I've seen the insanity bit before in Sephiroth, but it's in a more of a different, more traumatic light than Kefka. Kefka's just purely insane.
Right.
Sephiroth is insane because of circumstances that may or may not have been under his control.
Correct.
I swear to God, it's funny too. If
if there were therapists in the world of Final Fantasy VII, none of this would ever happen.
If someone just sat down and talked to somebody, none of these things would have happened. That's really funny.
If somebody sat down and talked to Sephiroth and be like, you know what? I hear you, and I know it sucks, but I am here for you, my friend. None of this would have ever happened.
I love that. That's
At least I feel like that. I don't know about what everybody else thinks, but that's just my opinion.
What's your take on Kefka? Are you a fan? What's your take on Kefka?
Definitely a fan.
Yeah.
I mean, like Kefka, if it wasn't for Sephiroth, he would be the most iconic Final Fantasy end boss.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah, there's no question, especially in the public opinion, right? Yeah. What about Kefka do you appreciate or like, or he's an easy character. He's one of those great characters for me where you really like him, but you really loathe him. He's wonderful because he's likable, but he's hateable at the same time, which is such a good villain. It's kind of what you want.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things. Yeah, you could definitely love to hate him. He's of course he's got the iconic laugh. Yeah. But it's like he's one of those things where he's a deserved, he's almost like a deserved bad guy in a way, where it's like you can. Is one of those things where it's not like he just kind of he doesn't just kind of come up out of nowhere. He's you start when you first see him out in the desert and everything, he looks like almost like a comic relief character. And then you find out later when you're doing the raid on the Magitech factory that, oh hey, he was the first person to go through the same process that Celis went through later. And so it's like, okay, maybe he's not, so even though you kind of just made him run, you run away in a hit, with one hit in the original, in the Sabin scenario, it's like, you don't really think too highly of him. It's not until later on where it's like he goes toe to toe with General Leo, who most people hold in highest regard as one of the best soldiers for the Empire. And then, to follow that up, then he starts going, after he's taken out General Leo, starts going toe to toe with the Espers, and he's able to single-handedly fight against this entire wave of Espers and turn them all into Magicite. So it comes time for when he decides that, oh hey, I'm going to be the main character now, and removes the Emperor and just decides that I want to screw everything up and move these statues around. It's like, okay, it's like, this guy feels like a true bad guy that needs to be stopped.
Absolutely. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think what I'm getting from this conversation is that he's a villain of opportunity, but he's also a villain of he never seems to have a good plan in place. He's kind of living in the moment, but he also has this kind of unwavering sense of almost morality. He flies by the seat of his pants, but he's got a true direction if there's anything. And so he's a very interesting character. He's got a lot of contradictions inherently in him, which makes him very interesting to just hang out with. What's your take? How did you feel about that final encounter with Kefka when you basically encounter him as a 3-4 stage deity?
Yeah, when that happened, it's like when you do that first encounter, and it's like, okay, hey, list your people in order. It's like, wait a minute, I'm going to be fighting. I have to fight him with all my characters. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, okay, this is not going to be a joke.
No, it is not.
And yeah, so and then you go into it. And of course, this in my first playthrough, I didn't power level. It's like, I didn't really distribute my gear well. I went in there, and yeah, I think my first attempt. I think I probably got to like the second or third aspect before I was killed. Before I was killed off.
Yeah.
And so like, and I had to like retool my entire strategy.
Yep.
And then like that later attempt, you had that like you get to that point where you're like in that final that final phase, and then he just he just has that like iconic attack where he just knocks you all down to 1 hit point at the very start. Like it's such a disheartening attack. It's just like, I have to go up against this.
As I was going through the Kefka audio, my main goal was multiple perspectives. And to a point, that's the central drive of this show in general, right? Many people with different perspectives, even if they're all generally positive. But something in me said, I need to talk to a Kefka cosplayer. Because it's one thing to be a fan, it's quite another to identify so closely with the character that you spend hours crafting a likeness and a persona. So I did. To close out this episode, let's meet Kefka cosplayer Yurik. You can find his work on Instagram and TikTok at Yurik Arcady, and his links will be in the show notes as he shares stories of playing the evil jester at conventions and why he chose to do so in the first place. Yeah, I always I've likened Kefka to, and I've said this a few times, so apologies to editors, my editor friends, because they have to hear me say the same thing 100 times to different people. I liken him to the character Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men.
Yeah, I can see that.
In that he has this single-minded morality that is different from yours, but he adheres to it, clings to it, and he can't be shifted from it. And that makes him very unpredictable, and that's very scary.
Yeah.
Unpredictable with power is an extremely scary combination because you can't reason with it. There's no reasoning with Kefka. Because Kefka, he's now a deity in the world of ruin. He's, I'm just going to blow up Mobliz. Because why not? With my light of judgment, I'm just going to do it. No reason. And that is a terrifying wild card to have with that kind of power. So I find Kefka terrifying.
Yeah, and it's like, it's worse with... because there's all the other towns that are like totally fine. So he's not just like, I'm going to wipe out everything. He's like, I'm going to let them live, and then I'm going to mess with them. Right. And like, that's so much worse because you never know when the hammer's going to drop.
It also reminds me a bit of again, this may be a slightly, not that esoteric reference, but Am from I Have No Mouth, But I Must Scream, which is that Harlan Ellison short story.
That's such a good game. Have you ever played the game?
I have played the game. It's actually a very solid game. It's actually a pretty good game. But it reminds me of Am in that sense, too, where Am, he's got this single-minded thing. He's going to toy with you, and you never know when the hammer's going to come down and how it's going to come down.
And in his view, he's punishing you, because they're all in there for a reason.
Yep, they're all in there for a reason, exactly. And I think Kefka's motivations are probably a little more simple, and it's just... it's very Joker style. And I've heard that analogy. It's not an original one. Very Joker-esque, where it's just like this agent of chaos who gets this ultimate power and wields it however they want. And you cannot reason with them. There's no like, hey, can you spare me? Because he's not concerned about that. You don't know what it's in his head. It's terrifying to me, that character.
Yeah, I think it's stronger if you know nothing about him. Like the Joker, like you never know his backstory. He's multiple choice. Like who knows?
And when I did a Final Fantasy VI episode super early in this podcast, like 2.5, 3 years ago at this point. And I think I posited, is Kefka a good character? Because he is pretty one-noted, right? He doesn't have this intricate backstory. And over the years, I've changed on that and said, oh, yes, he is. Because he's fascinating because of that ambiguity. That's why he's interesting and good.
I think a big part of it is like if you can look at a character and be like, if I lived in this world, would I be afraid of him? And if the answer is yes, he's probably a good character because you're like
totally yes. That's a great way of putting it. If he lived in this world, would you be afraid? Yes, I would. I am afraid of Elon Musk. I'm sorry. He's a crazy man with power and money. He can do whatever he wants. Yeah. That's not good. That's not a good thing. Not fun. Yeah. So I love that. I love that feel. But yeah, I'd love to hear some Kefka related cosplay stuff. That'd be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, probably the funniest is all the people I got mistaken for when I was Kefka. Somebody thought it was David Bowie, like I was doing some kind of David Bowie costume. Sure. Someone at the time thought it was Pennywise, but this was like OG Pennywise, right? From like the Tim Curry and there was like all sorts, and like you take it in stride, right? Like I thought it was funny at the time. I still think it's funny now. I don't know if you were like a online comic reader or not. If you've heard of the webcomic VG Cats.
Okay.
It was a big comic like around. They've probably had like 3 updates since like 2006.
Okay.
The webcomic artist was actually at the con that I was Kefka at, and I was going to ask him to buy like a copy of his comic, but when he saw me, he just gave me one. He drew a little Kefka in it and signed it for free.
Wow, how fun is that?
And it was just, yeah, and it was like he's a big like retro gamer, and so it was really cool. He's Canadian, like I am, and so seeing him at the con, which we didn't expect to see him there, was cool. And then the fact that he like recognized me, and that's part of like the retro game thing for me, is like everybody has such a strong reaction to seeing stuff like that, and there's like a big community feel to it because we're all ancient now, right?
we are all aged, but ancient. I think but you're right. The community of it is fascinating to me, and that's what I've always loved about cosplay, is that it's such a supportive community.
Definitely,
and everyone is there to help each other out. And my wife worked in fashion for a very long time.
Oh,
so
fun.
She went to FIT in New York, and she worked in fashion for about a decade. So I'm always like, Jane, we should do some sort of cosplay at some point. Again, we'd love to, but I just know the work, because I also worked in fashion for a while, so I understand I understand the work that requires in making those things. Like those things, when they don't just. How much time do you think was spent on that Kefka costume?
Well, I was actually about to say is when I put that costume together with my grandmother, we had no like references at all. Like the only references was like the Amano sketch. Like the one sketch of him like in profile, and the PlayStation cutscene, that one of him from the opening where he's got like the makeup on his face. And so like me and her were like looking at this, trying to figure out like what is this thing that's on him, and like trying to put it together. And now we look at like the 3D renders from like Dissidia and like the 14 like raid and stuff, and we're like, we're actually like, I look at him like we were pretty close like to what he actually looks like now.
It's very cool.
Yeah, and it was a long process, because there was like trying to kind of sketch this out, figure out what it's actually supposed to look like, and then find like fabric that works. And I was like, it has to be stretchy, I want it to be shiny, and I want it to be like stretchy so I can like kind of move, because I want to do like, at the time we were planning like some choreo stuff like on stage, so I had to be able to like move. It couldn't be too heavy. And like all these little details that at the time seemed like super important, and now it's just kind of like a bit of an inconvenience when I do like green screen stuff, because there's so many different colors to like deal with.
Oh no, you're right. Sure. Oh my gosh, I can imagine. And that just about does it for this edition of A Gamer Looks at 40. If you like this episode, there's a heap of other Final Fantasy content out there. I don't know how many episodes. Just go and look it up. It's all out there. If you go to my website, agamerlooksat40.com, there is a section for full episode playlists. You can find all of the Final Fantasy episodes grouped there in one player, so you can just binge it or during your next work event or meeting that you don't want to pay attention to. Thanks so much to Pete Harney and Kev for the Discord for helping me cut up these interviews. Thank you again to my wonderful patrons, and thank you for listening to A Gamer Looks at 40. You could be doing anything else with your precious time, but you're choosing to spend it with me, and that never goes unnoticed. Thanks again, and until next time.